So, dude, what happens to your relationships as you become more conscious? Really, it's actually more to do with what happens with you. So, what happens to you is you start to value different stuff. And that's reflected in your relationships. Yeah, because as you become more conscious, you realize like you've grown up with values, but they weren't necessarily like your real, authentic values, right? And so what happens is you start to become more in tune with yourself. Becoming conscious is literally becoming conscious of what, you are and what's true for you. So what starts to happen is you start to feel stuff. You're like, man, I actually really prefer a slowed down relationship. I actually really prefer a person who I can be completely honest with, completely 110% emotionally honest with. You might also want a certain depth. You want a depth, an intellectual depth, a spiritual depth, an emotional depth. When you're having some bullshit shallow conversation with someone, you're like, where the fuck is the depth? Nothing's happening here. We're just exchanging information. Where's the depth at, dude? You'll feel it. You'll be like, man, like, what the fuck am I doing? Is this even a relationship? Because if you're a conscious person, you know to face the truth. You know to face the reality of things, right? Basically, you know to have that conversation with them and to face truth together. Because what might happen is actually lying dormant within them is a greater depth, a greater spirituality, a greater consciousness and connection and everything else. But you just needed to have that conversation. One thing I've learned recently from my brother is that like how a relationship is really made is you go through the conflict, you go through the conversations you need to have, and on the other side of that, there's your relationship. Yeah? But if you never even go near those conversations that are essential, that are basically you saying your truth, you know how you have your experience? Maybe they say something that is completely different to how you feel and that fucks you up. It might not fuck you up, but it might trigger you. Yeah, imagine not being able to be honest with them in that situation. For me, man, I can't do that anymore. I used to kind of like push that stuff down. I used to kind of lie to myself. I used to kind of almost disassociate. Now I got to be honest. Because you're being honest with yourself. When you're really honest with yourself, you will be honest with everyone in your world because everyone in your world is yourself, projected outward, right? Also, just the way that you do something is the way that you can do everything. When you start to become conscious with yourself, you're going to be conscious with everyone else. Things change a lot, man. Why? I'll tell you the reason. The reason things change is because as you become more conscious, fundamentally, you become more emotionally honest. And when you start to share that emotional honesty, when you start to really embody it and be true to it, you will realize how different you are to everyone and how individual you are, how unique you are. You really just start to see yourself. Yeah, you see who you are. You see your needs, your values. You see you, right? Then, from that place of honest self-seeing, are you going to now be in the world? And now that you're being it, you'll notice you speak differently. You see the world differently. And so when you're walking along with the people that you were chilling with, hanging with, had relationships with, you realize, for me to literally be myself, I need to be emotionally honest with the person that I'm with. Because I notice that we can't do pretty much anything without making it clear of what's true for me. So in other words, instead of having like a low consciousness, asleep, normie ass conversation or hangout where you're not really doing fucking anything, you're just interacting with each other's projections and you're just saying some bullshit that's empty, instead, you could say something like, I've been spending a lot of time on my own and I've come to learn some things about myself. I want to share those with you. Are you open to that? what we've done is we've created the space for a genuine, honest conversation to happen. Okay? You got to speak with them. And now you want to use a few things. Number one, honesty. If you're really honest with yourself, part of you wants to keep it alive because that person is part of your ego. It's part of your old self. Them being there is kind of comfortable. If you were to walk away consciously and lovingly, you would really be showing yourself who you're becoming. You would really make it clear to yourself, wow, I'm really doing this. I'm really honoring my conscious self. Also using your honesty. Try this out. Just ask yourself, like, what would happen if you were to see them again? What would happen? Would anything happen? Would you gain anything? Would anything meaningful occur? If you're really honest, and I'm speaking from just my personal experience and perspective, if you're really honest, there's not much there. What you realize is that you want growth. But you know in your entire being that if you were to see them again, you are not going to grow. If you are, it's because you're accepting this part of yourself. You're accepting and working with your projections, which you find more difficult. That can grow you, but do you really want to have this relationship? You know, you could do that with pretty much anyone else in the world. Just, being with someone who you don't necessarily love and won't grow with tons. Instead, why don't you be with someone who you can actively grow with? Yeah? Not grow because you're accepting this person's low consciousness, which is really your own low consciousness. But rather, why don't you be with someone who you feel soul aligned with? Someone who you fucking love. Someone who you think is so awesome. And you're like, yeah, man, I want to be by your side as we grow together. I want to go on adventures together. I want to tell you some deep, dark secrets that I feel really uncomfortable doing. I want to grow with you. Ultimately, man, it's up to you. But what I have seen is that if you are honest, you do see this, you lovingly have the conversations you need to have, you walk away, you create new relationships which are more conscious. You feel more relaxed, more at ease. Like there's nothing to untangle or resolve. No. Your relationships that you have now are just whole and pure. And they run themselves. Because they have that spiritual element to them, which means you guys are both independent and self-sufficient and spiritually in touch and in tune. This means the very relationship that you have is basically made out of happiness. So it's a very non-codependent relationship. It's a very healthy relationship where you don't really need anything from each other. And that's why it's so fun and fulfilling to hang out. Because it's just two people, two wholes, doing this. Not having sex. You know what I mean though, man? Coming together and enjoying all the wholeness. It's just where it's at, man. Last thing from me is if you want any more help from me, I do offer coaching and mentoring. If you're interested in that, you can see the link in the description. Otherwise, my friend, lots of love. Take care. And as always, man, peace.